Hello, y'all. How is everybody? Let me turn on the mic so that we get this recorded. For those of you who are working on the side, you're welcome to stay, but do know that I will be talking, so.
Excuse me, have you?
It's saying low battery, so.
No, it's not.
Yeah. Oh, it says on. Okay.
Yes.
So, what I'm going to be talking about is discomfort, anxiety, fear about public speaking. It's really important for all of us, and especially in the world of work, to be able to address groups when we need to. About 25% of adults in the U.S. have anxiety about public speaking. About 25%. Not at a level that's diagnosable, but have anxiety about public speaking. So the impact can be from really pretty minimal, having some butterflies, being more anxious than you would like to be before you speak, and it can be as extreme as full-blown panic attacks, which can be really debilitating and interfere with people's ability to even get up on stage, if that's where they are supposed to be, or get up in front of a group like this, or defend their dissertation or their thesis, or give a presentation at their job that they really need to be able to give. So the range is really wide. Anxiety disorders in general are amongst the most common mental health diagnoses in the U.S. as well. So that goes beyond things like specific phobias, like fear of public speaking, to social anxiety, to generalized anxiety disorder. Everything connected with anxiety can be kind of captured under that big heading, but just know that it's common. There isn't a single cause, but here's some of what people will notice. Sometimes increased heart rate, because the physiology is aroused. Sometimes rapid breathing or shallow breathing or holding one's breath. There's frequently anticipatory anxiety, and what that means is, in a nutshell, future worry. Kind of worrying it in advance. People can get dizzy, feel unsteady on their feet, be nauseated, or have an upset stomach. They may shake or sweat or tremble or be breathless. And with more severe cases of symptomatology, if you will, then people will often start doing avoidance behavior. They'll do things so that they can minimize how much time they have to spend in front of audiences, how often they have to do that kind of thing. Here's some more symptoms, just in case you needed some. Tight chest. Can people have the experience of their minds going blank? One of the places you really see that is with a similar kind of process that happens when people have test anxiety. People will study, overlearn, know the material, walk into the test, and it's as if it's gone. Okay. The other thing is that people generally recognize that their fear is overblown, that it's more than what the situation calls for. And so one of the things that then happens is that people begin to think that there's something seriously wrong with them, or that they ought not be this way, or if they were just stronger minded, they could overcome it, which is not a helpful way to think. It doesn't help anxiety at all. So, there's a few things we know and a whole lot we don't know about anxiety in general. One thing we know is that there are estimates that genetics plays a fairly important role, at least in some cases of anxiety. Genes contribute 30 to 50% in the development of anxiety disorders. Anxiety disorders broadly, remember, there's no specific information about, say, a phobia about public speaking or any specific phobia, but in general. Physiology also plays a role, and the more one knows and the more people learn about physiology and the interaction with emotions, the more evidence piles up for that. It's important because one of the ways you interrupt it and manage the symptoms is you do some things with your physiology that help combat anxiety. So the autonomic nervous system gets aroused in response to fear or threat, and we prepare for battle, so to speak. Okay, not literally, but we do. And if you just enjoy reading good scientific literature that's also entertaining, this is an old one, but a good one, you might want to read Why Zebras Don't Get Ulcers, because it talks about this whole threat and physiologic response and the way that can just immediately go away in mammals other than us, and how we carry it around and the sorts of things that contribute to it. It's a good read. Some people are more likely to experience anxiety broadly, just period. They're more anxious than other people, and therefore are more likely to have some anxiety when they speak publicly as well. It's just across things. We know that when people are anxious, the emotional centers of the brain are more disrupted than are the higher cognitive centers. You know, it's not that we lose our ability to think so much as it is the emotional parts of us get to really be activated. There are familial patterns of anxiety as well. It's not unusual. I was a clinician for many, many years, by the way, and this was one of the things I treated a lot, and it's really not unusual for people who have anxiety symptoms big enough that they will come in for counseling and therapy about it. When you take a family history to find out that Aunt so-and-so had this, or Uncle Jim did that, or Grandma Martha was a bit obsessive compulsive and had pathways through her house because of the magazines. So it's not uncommon at all to find a history of some kind of anxiety that's pretty significant in background. Also, learned behaviors matter. So if you have folks who sorry, there are people, I was distracted by people talking. If you have folks who have parents or siblings or friends who are highly anxious about certain situations, and who they've witnessed do that and kind of learn that that's a scary situation, whatever that is, whether it's being alone in the house at night or walking across campus after dark or driving to Houston or whatever it is. Some people really learn that and then they reinforce it when they go and try to do one of those feared things, get anxious, they leave the situation and they feel relief, which reinforces the leaving. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay. And if you're under a lot of stress, whatever symptoms you have can make them worse. That's just human. Good news is fear and anxiety are a normal part of life. We all experience fear and anxiety. We need to have a certain amount of fear and anxiety in our lives or we're at risk. We don't take normal, ordinary care. In an academic setting, if we don't have enough anxiety, we're likely not to do what we need to do. I mean, why? There's no internal press to do it. So it's normal. Anxiety-related symptoms, another bit of good news, can absolutely be managed, and people absolutely can get better at managing those kind of symptoms. And some people even report, some folks who experience anxiety, that they learn to manage them so well and their anxiety goes down so significantly that they basically don't have anxiety symptoms at all in whatever situations they were having those in before. Does that? Okay. Another piece of good news is that there are a lot of strategies that work. And what works for one person isn't necessarily going to work for everybody. And what works for you today may not work tomorrow or the next day. So you need to know that there are a lot of strategies, and nearly all of them, well, all of them will be effective sometimes with some people. So before I go into that long list of strategies that work, I want to give you a way to organize them in your head, because this is one of the most useful things I think you can do with and for yourself around things like anxiety. So this is actually the model is a copyrighted model, so I don't have it all up here nice and neat for you. If you want to know where it is, it's in Mind Over Mood. You can look that up and look at it for yourself. So I just put a diamond, and I'm going to tell you where everything goes. The notion is that your physiology, your behavior, your thoughts, and your mood all interact with each other all the time. I think we pretty much know that, right? So that if I am slouching around my house on Saturday, slouching around my house meaning like hardly stirring out of bed or laying on the couch all day, and it's not just because I've just put in a heck of a week and I defended yesterday and I've got it, but I'm just laying there. The chances are I'm not going to be full of energy at the end of the day, because that's not what I'm not activating that in my body in the way certainly if I'm down or depressed and I just sit still, that's not going to be ultimately helpful in terms of impacting my mood in a way I want it to be impacted. The other thing you have to remember, though, is that there's also all this external world out here, and the external world impacts you and you impact it. There's a constant feedback loop. All right, so when we talk about the various interventions or strategies you can use, primarily what you're going to see is things that directly impact or directly engage behavior and thoughts, because it's easier to directly engage with those than it is to directly give yourself an injunction to feel better. It doesn't usually work to say, oh, well, don't be nervous to yourself. That, for most people, that doesn't help. It doesn't help to say to yourself, don't be sad, or don't be scared, don't be mad. For most of us, you can't just decide that and the feelings go away. There are ways that you can talk to yourself. There are things you can actually do that improve that. And part of why they may improve, why it can improve mood, is because it has impacted your physiology at the top of this triangle. So as I'm gesturing up here, that's what I'm gesturing at. You with me so far? Okay. So, the other thing you need to think about is what your own strengths and vulnerabilities are when you work with anxiety about public speaking or anxiety about anything else. The things that I can bring to bear for me that work well for me are not necessarily the things that are going to work well for you. Some of you might be able to get out and run 10 miles, and that feels exhilarating, and it helps you bleed off excess stress, and it's great. It helps calm you down. I can't do that. I can't run 10 miles. When I could run 10 miles, I didn't want to run 10 miles, and it wasn't relieving for me. I know many people for whom that is relieving. You know, I can activate a kind of a weird sense of humor, despite my mood, almost any mood, that is effective for me. Other people can't do that. Are you with me? So know what your strengths and your vulnerabilities are. Know what is usually helpful for you. And know about your external resources. Do you know who you can call and just not ask for a rescue, but just be straight up with? You know, I'm really anxious about this talk I got to do tomorrow. Or people that you can seek out in the audience that you know you're going to get visual feedback from that maybe helps you. Or alternatively, you know where you can look at the wall so that it's not necessarily obvious that you're not looking at anyone, but you aren't, because having them look back creates more anxiety. You need to know that about yourself. The other thing I'll say about strategies as a whole is that they need to work together and not battle each other. You'll see what I mean. Okay, let's talk about specific strategies. We'll spend most of the time here. One thing people who are anxious frequently forget to do is breathe. Seriously, people hold their breath until they have to breathe sometimes, or people breathe very shallowly and maybe rapidly, which, by the way, if you do long enough, can really mess up your blood gases and make you feel physically strange, which, if you are already anxious, can make you more anxious. Okay? Be deliberate about it, about your breath. Take time. And be patient. Some people talk about breath as a way to calm your body, and it is, in that if you breathe well, you can do some lovely things for your ability to relax muscles and all that sort of thing. But what you don't want to do is tell yourself to be calm, because a certain amount of arousal before you give a talk is a good thing. Excitement is also arousal, you know? Plus, if you're demanding that you be calm, if you're demanding that of yourself, and you're not calm, the likelihood is that you will increase your anxiety and not just decreases. We don't obey our own injunctions very well when we give ourselves orders. We don't tend to do that as a group, as of human beings, with ourselves any better than we do it with other people. Giving them is just be aware of that. So slowly and deliberately, be deliberate and intentional. Another thing that is really helpful to do is move. Again, deliberately. Whether that is getting up and moving around the room if you've been just sitting there, or it is taking a walk before you present, or if it is moving around the room as you're talking. Come on in. There's computers over here if you need a computer. But it really is nice to bleed off some of the excess stuff that gets going in your body when you're anxious. So move. Another thing that's important is checking how you're holding yourself. There are postures in which we hold ourselves sometimes that are really, really not helpful. A few years ago, people referred to it as power posing, and then that was debunked. And then it was undebunked by repeated meta-analyses and running way more sophisticated stats and all of that sort of thing, but it's not called power posing anymore. It's called postural feedback. And just for those of you who are kind of interested in a scientific way, there's also some evidence that's related that has to do with people who get Botox injections, who can become less able to understand the emotions of others because there's a feedback loop. There's a feedback loop. Yeah, I mean,
That's crazy.
it is. You can read about it. Email me, I'll send you the article. But over time, people aren't getting the same kind of feedback because usually when, I think it's pretty obvious, I haven't had Botox, but so if I'm talking to somebody, my face, at least in micro expressions, will begin to mirror what I see in somebody else's face, the emotion I see. And that does a whole physiologic feedback loop that feeds what we know in the brain as well, and vice versa. And when we're missing that feedback loop that comes from the physical mirroring, somehow it interrupts. It can interrupt our ability to empathize as accurately or to read the emotions of others. So all of that is simply to say this: what you're doing with your body matters. And no, standing up straight or getting into a comfortable, solid position is not going to fix all of your problems. But it can help you if you can hold that pose for a little bit. It can help you not feel like this up in front of the stage, where you're kind of folding in, taking less space, and huddling, like don't hurt me kind of thing. Okay? And you don't have to be flamboyant about it. So getting yourself physically centered, not teetering. It doesn't matter whether you're square necessarily, squared off to the audience, but comfortable and kind of centered in your body. You don't have to do a Superman pose or a Wonder Woman pose. If you want to, go for it. If that gets you, kind of centered. I wouldn't do it right in front of the audience, but it can help you. By the way, sometimes silly walks help too. I'm just saying. Any of you remember? Okay, I'm showing my age. Again, one of the funny British shows that was on years ago did a thing with the Ministry of Silly Walks, and it was just videos of these British people walking around in really peculiar ways, and it was really funny, and it was a thing for a while. But you seriously can do something silly as well. Again, it's probably not something you want to do on stage or in front of your dissertation or thesis committee, but if it helps you kind of loosen up and get comfortable in your body before you start, then do so. One of the worst things you can do if you're anxious is sit and fret before you present. Sit and fret. Worry.
Like an example of it.
Okay, I got to remember to cover this and this and this and this, and I know so-and-so over there isn't a big fan of mine, and I don't think I know my slides well enough, and like that. That's fretting.
True, that's true. It's happened to me before.
Yeah, you don't want to do that right before you present. You'd be better off standing, being comfortable. Feel free to come in. Getting comfortable in your body, focusing on your breath, that kind of stuff. Does that make sense, everybody? Again, you need to know yourself. For some of you, a brisk walk. I have some students, dissertation students, who have always been athletes in high school and college and that sort of thing. And for some of those folks, getting out and taking a really fast-paced walk around campus is a great thing for them to do, to bleed off kind of excess anxiety. For others, being quiet, not sitting and fretting, but being quiet and getting focused in the space and that sort of thing is a better way for them to get ready to do what they're about to do. So know yourself. Check yourself in terms of how you're holding yourself. We've talked about that. The next strategy, that's really a whole lot of different strategies, has to do with challenging your thoughts. And when you are challenging the way you're thinking, in my view, it is much better to ask yourself, does this help and is it true? Than to try to get yourself to do positive thinking. Why you smile? Does it?
Because I have done a lot of things. It's one of the things that I make friends with it.
With your
My thoughts.
good way to think about it. That's a great way to think about it.
This is what I'm looking for.
Oh, okay. There's some evidence that talks about positive thinking being a good thing, but there's a lot of where the danger is how you define that and demanding that of yourself, that you think positively all the time. And so if you're dealing with a difficult or important situation, I mean, defending your thesis or your dissertation, those are high stakes things. Or you're giving a talk in front of 500 people and you've never done that before, and it's important for your professional reputation. That's kind of a high stakes thing. So unless you're an actor kind of person, or you really love performing in front of a group and having all that attention on you, it's going to be better to think about, to assess how you're thinking in terms of whether it helps you and it's accurate, than trying to tell yourself to think happy thoughts. For most people. So assess that. Part of what you want to think about is, am I overestimating the stakes? I just mentioned some high stakes things. But even with those high stakes things, we can overestimate the stakes. So if I don't do well at this presentation in front of, at my professional association, and I'm given one of the keynotes or whatever, let's really run it up there, and I blow this, then everybody in the profession is going to think I'm a fraud or a failure, or we can do all kinds of numbers, and I will never be able to recover. I will never be taken seriously again. So are you overestimating? Are you thinking from a performance orientation instead of a communication orientation? That's one thing that can really help a lot. Performance orientation has to do with, okay, I'm up here to give this presentation, and what I'm expecting is that all of you are here to judge me. I mean, that's what it's about, is people grading me. As opposed to, I'm up here to communicate with all of you some information that I think would be helpful, or that I'm really excited about, or for whatever. It's my passion. You need to know it. But my goal is to communicate. And even when you are defending a dissertation or a thesis, or you're giving maybe you're interviewing for a position on a campus and you're having to give a research presentation in front of students or something like that. And part of what they're doing is, kind of grading you to see how the fit is. What you still want is to have your primary focus to be on, I'm here to communicate my research. I'm here to communicate some information that I feel good about, or a study that I did. Does that fit for you? Does it make sense to you? The other thing about a performance orientation is that There's some special and unique set of public speaking skills that some people just have and other people just don't have. And consequently, because I don't have those, whatever those are, then I'm going to be anxious. Feel free to come in. I'm going to be anxious, nervous speaker for the rest of my life. I'm never going to get comfortable doing this. I'm always going to look awkward. At best, I'll be able to get through it without making a fool of myself. You know, that kind of thing. There are public speaking skills, but they're not special, mysterious, hidden skills. You can learn ways to get better at it. Okay. Another thing to consider when you're listening to how you think or you're assessing how you think is whether you're defining how you perform now according to something that was maybe true of you in high school or maybe true of you in another whole circumstance. Most of us have had at least one bad experience with speaking in front of a group where we either blew it or we felt like we blew it or affect was, our tone was off or the audience wouldn't respond even though you were doing whatever you always do. And sometimes that one performance that's not what you want it to be can really cause you to define yourself in a way that's not especially helpful. Another thing is pay attention to whether you're what-ifing. What-ifing is worrying about what if this happens, what if that happens, what if something else happens, apart from actually planning. It's one thing to, okay, what if the mic doesn't work? Okay, then I need to have backup mics available, or I need to check to see if they have backup mics. Or what if the PowerPoint doesn't work? Okay, then this is what I'll do. But most of the what-ifing we do is not related to planning. It's a way we scare ourselves. So if you're just what if, that isn't about either planning or being creative. What if I combine this color with that color? That's creative, for example. Or curiosity, maybe I should say. Then you want to check that. And the way you can check it is there anything I can do about this right now? And if there is, you go do it. And if there's not, then you really work to let that go. Make sense? Okay. When you check your thoughts, it's important to interrupt them. And again, replace with something that's helpful and accurate, not necessarily positive. Yeah, this is going to be hard, and I will get through it. I will be okay when it's over. I mean, maybe that's the best I can do. I don't have to convince myself that I'm going to nail it. I can acknowledge, yes, it's true that this is hard, and it's kind of scary to think about doing. And I trust myself to take care of myself when it's done. Or I know that I'll survive. Or maybe, yes, this is going to be hard, but I've overlearned this material. I know this stuff cold. I've been living and eating and sleeping this material for the last 3 years of my life. I probably know as much about it as certainly anybody on campus and maybe anybody in the United States, depending on your field. Does that make sense to y'all? So it doesn't have to be butterflies and puppy dog tails. I'm going to nail this, but it does need to be accurate and helpful. Another thing you can do, and if you tend towards anxiety, whether here or in public speaking or elsewhere, it's a good idea to do this regularly. check your body. Just do a body scan periodically. If you can do it several times a day, you can always set one of those annoying alarms on your watch or something to interrupt you. But in that kind of body scan, what you're doing is noticing where you're carrying tension and just consciously putting it down. I know that I can end up at the end of one of the days we have sometimes over in grad studies and we're all busy, I can end up with my eyes being like this, this is wide open for me, and my neck being somehow shorter because my shoulders have come up during the day as I carry more tension. And so just paying attention to noticing that and letting those muscles go. And if I have to, pressing my shoulders down, I don't know if you can see that, but I can feel it. And then letting go of them can make a difference. Does it fix anything? No. It doesn't change anything about being busy at the office. What it does help do is it helps me train myself to carry myself in a more relaxed way, where I'm not doing high tension stuff to my body that constricts blood flow, that can interfere with how I breathe and how I move, and therefore how I think and how I feel. Does that make sense? So just check periodically. And pay attention to whether you're kind of folding in on yourself and making yourself small, or you're okay with taking up whatever space you take up. That doesn't mean be rude. You don't have to walk through the breezeway flailing your arms and not caring whether you knock people's coffee out of their hands or bump people over or something like that. But it means that you don't have to shrink into yourself and make yourself smaller than you are either. You don't have to make yourself do that. You can if you want to, and when it's deliberate and you have good reason, maybe okay. But being relaxed in your body is generally not consistent with that. Okay. We talked a little bit about adopting a more expansive pose. Everybody know who Usain Bolt is? So Bolt, the Olympic runner. He's one example of somebody who postures himself in a really expansive way, whether it's like this or that thing he does thank you. Yes, that thing. And his feet may be this far apart when he does it, and he is. And he's incredible. He's just incredible. But my point is, he's not afraid to take up space. On the other hand, Simone Biles, she's a tiny little person. She is short. She's under 5 feet, as I recall, isn't she? Yeah. That woman can take up some space too. And when she moves, she looks really powerful. Even if she's surrounded by people, in part because the woman is really powerful, physically powerful. Even when she's around people who are considerably taller than her. And it's not just when she's doing floor routine or doing some thing on the beam or those. It's when she's walking across the room, she looks powerful. Lots of athletes kind of are trained into that. And by athletes, I don't mean just football players and basketball players and Olympic athletes. I mean people who are physical and athletic kind of as a part of their lives. Dancers are that way, and they can look they can take up space because they have to. I'm just inviting you to take up your space as well. Oh, we gotta. practice, 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 practice. If you have anxiety about public speaking, practice. And practice in unusual ways sometimes. The most effective practice is actually doing it. It's in vivo, doing it. So if you have the opportunity to practice in front of friends, if you have the opportunity to practice in front of people maybe who are classmates but not necessarily friends or people you don't know well, then do that. If you have the opportunity to just introduce somebody to a group instead of like being the speaker, take the chance and the opportunity to do that real short thing. Where you can, tape yourself. This is a really scary thing for a lot of folks, but if you can videotape yourself or tape yourself on your phone or whatever and not be overly critical in the watching, that can be helpful too. It's one of the ways many of us who do how do we talk about that? Athletes do it, clinicians who are in training, learning to be counselors do it. Lots of us do, observe ourselves because it's a really important part of getting better at what we do. So practice it. And most of us, by the way, are really uncomfortable doing that when we first start doing it. But yeah, if you tend towards hypercriticality of yourself, if you were to do something like that, don't critique alone without a trusted friend who can say, whoa, wait a minute. Because you need to notice what you do well, too, or what you're at least okay with. I liked the tone of voice. I liked, I was speaking loud enough. I really need to practice not looking at the floor so much and trying to get my eyes up. That sort of thing. You can also practice in vitro, which has to do with, generally we're talking about imaginal practice, so you're imagining yourself in the situation and performing comfortably. That's what you want to see. With anxieties, that are often performance-based, it is not always as effective as practicing in front of a group. It's not as effective as in vivo practicing. But there's some things you can't practice for in real life. You can't practice your GRE if you have test anxiety, unless you mean you're going to take it multiple times. Or you can't practice your physics final. You can practice being in the room, and you can practice being in the room and being calm, or imagining somebody handing you the test, that sort of thing. But you can't do the thing itself. If you do imaginal practice, it's important to see your practice doing it well. Feeling good while you're feeling okay, being calm. Yeah. And you want the image to be as clear as you can. So if you are in a spot where you can see where you're going to do whatever it is you're going to do that. If I have to defend in one of those theater type rooms over in where the engineering offices are now. Yeah. Then, no, I wasn't thinking of those, but that's a perfect example. Then I want to imagine myself in that kind of space where I'm down on the floor with the audience up in rows. And basically I've maybe got a computer screen over here, but everything is behind me. So I want to have as realistic a picture of that as I can. And I want to see myself feeling calm and moving the way I want to move. Yes? Okay. You can also watch other people who do it well. and see what you like about their performance. We have some amazing folks on this campus who know tons about public speaking and doing it that well. And they're in a variety of departments. Liberal arts, you've got in communications, there are a lot. I mean, Diana Ivey is incredible in terms, and she's not the only one. There are people all over campus who know that. There are people in the College of Business who are good at that. They come at it from a different perspective, and what they talk about is maybe being able to make great presentations to your team, or the importance of being able to talk to groups of people well because of things around leadership. You know, so they may be talking about it very differently. There are people in counseling and in psychology who will have a lot of experience with these kind of things, but practice wherever you can. Know your topic. Overlearning can be helpful, but don't make yourself crazy. Yes. Yes, overlearning. Be organized, and by that I don't mean having your pens and pencils in the same place. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about organizing your materials in a way that they're logical when you present them. And you have a way to move from A to Z. I mentioned earlier I have dissertation students. I always meet with my dissertation students before they defend, because I want to see that they have an outline of how they're going to move through the process that helps them stay focused and keep moving through the process rather than getting stuck in a literature review or whatever. So whether they do that using a PowerPoint, or they do that with handouts, or they do that with their notes, there's a lot of variations depending on what they're doing that might work, but it needs to start at A and move through to wherever we're going. And get comfortable with silence. It's fine to take a few seconds, longer than it's going to feel like a few seconds, to think and take a breath and be deliberate about what you want to say next. It's not a wrong thing. It's not bad communication. It doesn't make you look dumb. Some of the best speakers you will ever hear do that. They pause. Silence is also okay coming from your listeners. I like feedback. I like to see people nodding or looking at me or squinting or frowning, but giving me feedback. I kind of exist for a feedback loop when I'm talking to folks. Other people don't do that so much, and sometimes the truth is we talk to groups of people who are there who are pretty silent, or they're there because they're meeting a responsibility or something. You want to be careful not to interpret that as you must be doing a bad job. Otherwise, you would be able to get these people to laugh or to smile at you or to look you in the eye or whatever. Well, maybe, I have off days too, but you don't need to catastrophize that when it happens. Get there early enough so that you can get familiar with what you're going to do. I had every intention, even though I've been doing anxiety stuff for literally 30 years, I had every intention of being here 15 minutes early just so I could relax and have a cup of coffee or a cup of water and chat with Agnes and Karis and get myself here. Well, things interfered, and so I was coming up here at the last minute. Try not to do that. I want to mention this other thing, this technique. In my field, we call it a half smile. I don't know what people call it. elsewhere. But almost grimace your face in a smile, and then like the scary clown, and then just kind of let it go and relax into, it may not even look like a smile, but from inside I can experience that as lips slightly turning up instead of turning down, regardless of what it looks like out there, because we have different faces. See, that's an all the way smile. Because again, that feedback loop, it can help you change the way you think and feel.
Change the subject. I would say it sometimes changes the subject as well.
Sometimes.
That depends. That's not even related to what you're. But sometimes a smile can change the subject instantly.
Sure, yeah. And then find people who can help you enhance your skills and knowledge. If you get the handout on, I think Agnes will post this online. I put up a few resources here. I did a quick search of the library. There are tons of books in this library. Tons of books about public speaking or about overcoming anxiety. There are tons of them. I did a quick search of of YouTube. There are a bunch of them available on YouTube. Not everything is good, so you want to pay attention to what you're using as a source. But basically, anything that allows you to approach the source of anxiety, begin to feel that anxiety, and if the anxiety goes up too much, back up from the anxiety and kind of recover, and then this is critical, then reapproach the anxiety. It's something that you can work with, and you can do that using your thoughts, using your body, especially because both of those things help calm down that physiology that's up at the top. And all of those things calm down. I shouldn't say that, but can calm down, soothe mood a little. Questions? I'm aware of the time, so. What's that?
Something is a bit related into anxiety. Ego. Where does it take place with anxiety in relation with it?
Ego as in, I'm so great, that kind of ego, or ego, huh?
In the stream of thoughts.
But in what way are you referring to ego?
Like Freud's ego? Like Freud's ego, like ego, id, and superego, that one?
Kind of. Something like the feedback more of other people, that egoic.
That varies a whole lot with.
Does it take place in anxiety for
Not for everybody. Not for everybody. It depends on what kind of ego thing a person or orientation to ego has going on, with the person has going on. It's really kind of a. I'm trying to think of a way. If I'm a person who is pretty narcissistic and really believe that I'm all that, whatever all that is, and yet have a fair amount of insecurity, which usually underlies that narcissistic thing, then what you say to me or how you evaluate me or difficulty performing well in an environment will threaten my sense of self. But what I'll probably do with the anxiety is push it out on everybody around me, kind of aggressively, you know? And that's a very different kind of thing. So that's more like a personality type or way of being, which will impact how anxiety is experienced and what a person does with it. Somebody who's really narcissistic may not ever come to a group like this, for example, because it means somehow that there's something wrong with them, or that they're weak, or that they're exposed, or whatever. Makes sense? And certainly don't need to get better at anything. Thank you all for coming and for giving me that eye contact feedback that I look for so that I can plan where I'm going next. If you have questions, I'll be here for a bit.